Hi guys, in this video we're going to be looking at this Lord of the Rings Treebeard. I'm going to build him up and paint him.
Gruffy Crow.
Okay, so as I record this bit, it is Boxing Day, and I'm putting this together as a bit of a Christmas treat to myself because I absolutely love a plastic kit. Just putting a plastic kit together is fun for me. The more complicated, the better, and hopefully this is going to be a decent size with a decent number of pieces. I bought this a little while back, just on a whim. I kind of thought I'd probably use it in my Oathmark army, which is probably still what I'm going to do with it. But hopefully it'll be a nice big giant size. But yeah, I bought it on a whim and I haven't got around to putting it together. So I've kind of just been saving it for a special occasion. Let's see what we've got here. So we've got the instructions, a couple of frames, and a great big base. So what's that? That's a 60 and a bit. And if that's the beard and it goes halfway down his body, then he is going to be a fair old size, I reckon. There's a lot of very small pieces here. So we'll assemble a selection of tools. We've got my trusty scalpel, and I'll put a fresh blade on that before I do much. I've got some of my favourite plastic glue. That's the important one. Got a pair of tweezers, don't know if they'll come in handy. It's always useful to have them to hand. And a pair of my newest, sort of sharpest sprue cutters. Not branded ones, I just buy these off eBay. But these have been quite a nice pair. Now often with these plastic kits I generally don't really follow the instructions and I just sort of put them together how I assume they will go, but I think in this case I am going to need the instructions because these are complicated. Okay, so the first part is putting together the on-foot hobbits. So is there enough parts for on-foot and mounted? Okay, because we don't know if we've got enough parts to do these guys on the shoulders, which is where I want them, and on foot. I'm just going to skip the hobbits for now. I'm going to start over here. So 1, 2, and 3. And Henry, that's that one, and that one. Another thing that I tend to do with plastic kits that I won't be doing this time is I snip off all the parts and get them all cleaned up, and then sort of build them at my leisure. But because I think these part numbers are going to be pretty important, because one bit of gnarled old wood kind of looks like the next, I think I am going to just build these sub-assemblies and snip them off this time. Talking about the gnarled old wood, the details on this are amazing. Got little mushrooms and patches of moss, and what I'm assuming is like a kneecap. And it looks like they've made some effort to put the sprue connectors in the joins, which means I'm going to have to clean them up nicely to get a good fit, but that means they'll not be visible. Same with the mould lines, they seem to be in pretty carefully selected places. So I'm going to just apply some glue down the flat edges where I assume this is going to connect. And then with the spike up, we add this in here. So these two bits are fit together fairly seamlessly, and then this is the first part of the leg, and I've got that little ridge in there, and that slots into there. So I'm actually really impressed with the way this goes together, and that's hiding all of those joins. I don't even know where I put green stuff in there, and if you don't know, you can't even see where that joins. So I know I'm only 3 parts in, but I actually have seen enough to say that I'm fairly impressed with the quality of this kit, even for a Games Workshop kit. This is impressive to me. and it's definitely complicated enough to be a nice treat. So I'm just going to work through the rest of these pages, basically the same, snip them out, clean them up, and build his pair of legs. Okay, I will say, I got the part 4 in, and I really couldn't figure out how that was meant to sit, because I was trying to match it up on this side, where it, once again, matches up perfectly, and they've put the join down this sort of log, causing these nice indents and everything. But it left this big hole here, and it wasn't until I saw the next part. Now this really should teach me to dry fit more. So I've got this dry fit in this at the moment, and this bit, so it doesn't look right almost, but this weird scraggly bit just fits in there. And again, I'm just going to say I am blown away with how this goes together, and the quality of it is insane. How that it's like one of those puzzles that you get, like the wooden puzzles that don't look like they should fit together, and then they kind of just do, and you figure it out, and it's amazing. I'm assuming some sort of computer figured this out, because I don't think I'm not sure a human designer could be as cunning as this. Okay, that's the legs put together, and I quite like this because the legs have gone together quite nicely, even though the glue's all still wet. And then we start on the arms, and then presumably then we do the torso. Yep, it's the torso here and the head, and then we sort of glue it together. So by the time we get to gluing the legs on, they'll have set, presumably. These are incredibly intricate. You've got bits like here that goes all the way through, but because of the way it's built, you've got texture on the insides of all of that. Because of the amount of pieces required to get these bits together, you know, it's got all these layers. And then on this leg, the first leg, we've got all these leaves that sort of overlap and crisscross each other. That's quite impressive actually to do on plastic. And I think this is one of the limits of 3D printing. I think this is not more complicated than a 3D printer could do for sure, but I think because it's plastic, I think it's going to be a lot tougher and more robust than you'd get with 3D printing. I wouldn't trust a model this size with a knee joint like that 3D printed, because I know I would snap it. Although some of the bits where you've had to sort of make the connections aren't as clean as they would be if it was 3D printed, I think overall a model like this is better in plastic. And another crazy example of the way these things intertwine. This has just taken me a minute or so to work out how these two bits go together. And it's actually, this nub up here goes in the middle of this bit. So I'll try slightly on in all different directions, but you have to kind of put it, you're going to have to put it here and then sort of line those mushrooms up with the notches there. So yeah, you kind of go in and twist. Even when you know where it goes, it's kind of tricky. There you go, and then it sort of all of a sudden just slots into place and all the lines disappear. Putting something like this together versus putting all things like the old metal scrap launcher, it's a completely different sort of challenge. Back in those days, it was I've got two chunks of metal that I know how they should fit together, and how am I going to do it? You know, pins and green stuff and what have you. And now it's I've got two bits of plastic and I don't know how they start together, but when they do, I think that's going to be permanently stuck and invisible. This is definitely, though, I said I'm still only a quarter of the way through maybe, a very challenging kit. I certainly wouldn't give this to a new starter. Maybe Games Workshop should start putting levels on like they do on Revel kits. Once again, I want to draw your attention to the just crazy amount of detail. Once again, it's not something my printer wouldn't be able to do. In fact, it might even be a little bit sharper and you wouldn't have to worry about all these flat parts on the side, which is a limitation of the moulding, but still, this is still pretty amazing detail. And here's another good example of why this wouldn't necessarily work as a 3D printed model. We've got a bunch of these little tiny sections of leaf, which, once again, we could definitely print, but I don't think they'd be feasible to have sort of hanging off a model. Whereas I feel like once that's set, that is going to be very sturdy, unless I'm particularly clumsy. And there's a lot of those little bits and pieces all over the place. Now, as I was constructing his torso, I got a bit too much glue in the, well, actually where the arm was, because I thought that's kind of how the torso was joining. So I've jumped ahead and popped his arm on. And the fact I did things in the wrong order has made getting this assembly in and lined up correctly an absolute nightmare. So this is why things are done in a specific order, I guess. So we're almost there for the main part. Last but not least is obviously going to be his head. There we go. Once again, goes on without any marks. I am very impressed with this. And he stands up by himself at the moment, and there he is on his sort of 60-ish mil a base. Now, if he's going to be an Oathmark giant, he should be on a 100 by 50, which he would fill out quite nicely. The problem is I like to have everything in that Oathmark army on round bases as well. So my other giants are on bases similar to this, though I do have this one. I do like to have my Games Workshop models on Games Workshop bases, something purist about it. I'm not even sure he'd fit on one of these sort of true 50 mils. Not nicely anyway. There's a lot of overflow there. But while I was rooting around in my base box, I found this. I'm not sure where it's from, but he actually fits really nicely onto it. But it'll allow me to fit him on a sort of square chariot base quite easily. So this is about 50 mil wide by 80. So it's 50 by 80 sort of oval there. So he fits within that Oathmark giant footprint, but also fits the model on quite nice. So I'm going to go for that. That one of those mysterious pieces is definitely for under there, which I can't find in the instructions. I might be being thick, but doesn't appear to be in the instructions. But that is where it goes, so I'll add that in. And the last bit of tree, do you know what? I actually spotted that this was missing as I was building it and then forgot about it. It's actually his last finger off this hand, which is going to be a nightmare to fit in there now. But I'll get it in. Which is 100% not in the instructions, because these are all 30. So this is 61 or 62. And these are all 30s, and actually it leaves it kind of unfinished in the instruction, I think. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers. So now we've got a couple of examples of a place where the instructions could be clearer. For instance, this panel here, that I had to sort of figure out for myself, because those instructions, the way they're drawn there is next to useless. And then, yeah, we've got 2 examples of bits where the instructions are just plain missing. But it seems weird that those pieces are also marked randomly 61, 62, when really the rest of the kit only gets up to sort of 30, you know, what are we up to here? Yeah, 30s, you know, 35. Oh no, there's some 40s over here, but there's no over 60s, or even 50s, I don't think. But now all that's left on the frames is Hobbitses. This one's Merry. These little Hobbit models are adorable. I should have read the part numbers at the beginning and noticed that they are all unique parts. But they do give an example of why you need some nice sharp clippers for something like this. Because if not, you'd be liable to sort of annihilate these heads. Whereas with these, I can get relatively close and make quite a nice clean cut. And in the few short seconds it took me to snip out the rest of Seated Merry, I seem to have lost his face. Oh, there it is. I thought Treebeard was intricate and fiddly. This is worse. This reminds me of putting Malifaux models together. Though I have seen that there was some talk of the newer Games Workshop plastic kits, the Blood Bowl kits, having separate thumbs and things like that. I think he sits up here maybe, while his little buddy sits on this top branch. Okay, so we've got him all undercoated, first with black and then with some grey. So the grey will help me put some lighter colours down easier, but the black will mean that I'm already in all those nooks and crannies, and if I miss anything it'll just look like shadow. I'm also going to work on a base for this guy for putting him in Oathmark. So this is a 50 by 100 a bit of plastic, and I've got some old bits of cork wall tile here. So I'm lining this up in the corner to start with, and this is slightly self-adhesive, but not really. Would have been, I imagine, when it was initially attached to a wall. There we go, so there's my little base sandwich, and then I'm going to pop him on there. Sharpie, make sure he's all lined up where we want him. In case anyone was wondering, I think he'd look quite well on one of these bases. So if you wanted to put him on a 50 by 100. So I'm just making sure I can get the Sharpie right up against the edge of the base. And then in theory, if we cut the inside line out of that, we should have a perfect base for him. So I'm just going to neaten these bits up and glue them down, and I'll be able to put some sand on and make the same texture, and then we'll have a base adapter for him. In the meantime, I'm going to get some paints down this guy. I'm going to start off with a base coat of Rhinox hide on the body and on the base and everything. Make it nice and dark, and then we're going to go with some similar colours as we've used on this end, which is a 3D printed one from Warp Miniatures, if you're interested. So that's going to be some of this Idrin flesh. So I'll probably try and cover about 80% of it, just leaving the Rhinox hide in the nooks and crannies. And then we'll go with some sort of highlights of the Xandri dust, possibly then a wash of some Earthshade, and then maybe a bit more Xandri dust. And that's how I do my wood. You can look at things like my Siege Tower video and a few others to watch me do that stage by stage. I was going to skip all these stages for you guys, but I will say that getting in to all of this beautiful dense detail on the back. So I think if you were going to try and do a sort of pro level paint job on this this model, I'd be tempted maybe to suggest painting some of these bits disassembled and then just doing the final highlights with them all put together. And this is also the reason why we did that black undercoat first. And there we've got all three of those browns on, and I think that's working quite well. What we've got down some of these edges, if you see down here, we've got some like, this is like bark or gnarled, whereas this is a bit more lively and alive. We've got a few bits like that. So I think what we're going to do with those bits is I'm actually going to paint these sort of nice smooth bits in with just pure Xandri dust to kind of make it look like, so say you've got like up here, you've got like the exposed trunk, it's kind of fallen off, exposing the lighter wood inside. So I'm going to do anything like that, anything that I want to look more like sort of fresh wood eventually in pure Xandri dust at this point. And I think that'll end up giving us some nice contrasty bits. Because I think with a model like this, you sometimes run the danger of sort of painting it. Like this guy, I just printed him off, he didn't really cost me anything, and I just whacked a few browns on there just to so get him based up, and he was ready for a table for whatever I needed him for. Whereas obviously I spent a bit more money on this model. It clearly wasn't the easiest thing to put together. I want to give it a bit more time and love. So I'm going to try and spend a bit more time looking at the different variations, and rather than just a few layers of dry brush and call it a day. I'm going to have to do another pass to make sure I've got them all, but yeah, I think that's looking really good with those paler patches. So next up is going to be an Aggrex Earthshade wash over basically the whole thing. Get into all those bits where we've done the pale, and that'll make nice edges, get it all over. And I think it'll start to come alive then. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick look at the Hobbits on foot, just so we can get an idea of the scale of everything. Here they are. I've started painting their skin up already. It's weird how light these little minis are actually as well. And we'll take a look at them compared to some other Hobbits in my army. So first of all, these are some older Lord of the Rings miniatures, and the details are a bit slighter. They're a little bit smaller, but they're definitely going to fit alongside these older Lord of the Rings minis without any trouble. Similar sort of scale, but yeah, just these are much finer detailed faces is the main difference. And I've got a selection here of a few more from different companies. So the bulk of my Halfling army is made of these cobblestone ones. And normal sort of comparisons go, they're a bit chunkier, a little bit taller, but not too bad. And then we've got the Midland Miniatures guy, chunkier again, but still I think we're getting to the borderline of what's passable in the same army now, I think. But as always, on a tabletop, all sort of jumbled up. Once again, I don't think you're necessarily going to notice too much. So scale wise, yeah, if you've got old Lord of the Rings miniatures or you're trying to mix them in with this sort of Hobbit sort of army, you shouldn't have too much problems. Okay, so Treebeard here has had another Xandri Dust dry brush, just to try and make all of those tiny little details pop. I'm now going to start with some more detailing, I think. I'm going to use some of this sort of ivory Meneth White base and just try and pick out some of the little details on the bits that we did lighter, so the exposed sort of heartwood parts. Hopefully that will bring those details out a bit more. The beards, I'm going to do this really light green, which is a moot green. I'm just going to do that on the whole beard. I'm also going to go around and do that on these little mossy patches, but I've got another plan for those as well. There's also a series of these little flat mushrooms, which I'm going to do a pretty stark white, I think, because I really want those to pop out as well. So there's some down here. So I'm really going to spend my time trying to pick out some of these details, because I think the more details we pick out, the better the sort of wood colours will look as well. Okay, we've got the moss and the mushrooms all sort of filled in, and then I've given them a little wash. The mushrooms got a bit of a black wash, just to add some shadows. And then the moss got a green wash. And I'm just highlighting the edges of the mushrooms now with a slightly stark white, but I think it's because I kind of wanted it to sort of stand out as much as possible. And sometimes when you see sort of fungus on trees, it is quite a bright white. Now, if you've seen my sort of smaller tree video, you'll know that I'm going to use this clump foliage. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cover anywhere where there's a leaf. Just going to go around the whole model, so you're not going to be able to see any of these sculpted on leaves. But just in case you can, I am going to go around. I think the closest green I've got to this is probably going to be this wild flesh, maybe. Yeah, so I'm just going to go around and do some of this wild flesh on all of the leaves as well. But not that you'll see it, hopefully, in the finished product, just in case anything sort of pokes through. But anyway, my next main thing is going to be these halflings. But these will get the same sort of colour scheme as all the rest of the halflings in my army, so they'll be the same greens and yellows, because I want you to be able to sort of draw your eye to them. They're not super detailed little sculpts up here, actually. The detail's quite fine, but there's not a lot to work with, so it shouldn't be too much hassle. Hopefully they'll be interested and draw your focus and be sort of passable, but I don't think they're going to take too long to paint. Okay, so while I'm waiting for some of the washes to dry on the face, I'm going to work on these moss patches around the body. So what I'm doing here, look, is we've got the painted ones, but I'm actually making them a bit more realistic. I'm using some of this light green clump foliage, and I'm just dabbing a bit of super glue on with the end of a toothpick, something a bit like this, just sort of painting this where I want it to go. And with the toothpick I can be quite accurate. And I'm just sort of covering the bits that we've painted the green moss colours, and then peeling off some nice dainty little bits and just sticking them on. And the super glue's grabbing this stuff almost instantly. I don't think there's any worry about that coming off. And I think it works quite well. Works quite nicely as a sort of extra little feature. Oh yeah, just another quick thing to say, this is a gel super glue, which obviously makes this a lot easier to do. I'm not sure you'd be able to do this with a regular super glue. Okay, like I did with the smaller trees, I've added a little clump of this clump foliage to each of the places where the leaves were sculpted on, and that's included on the front of the beard, so we've got a big mashup of different foams on the beard now. And then all the branches have got little things of tree, and I've left some of the bare bits just sticking out, and I think that looks quite good. I've tried to pick out a few of the details in the beard, like this little snail shell and some of the bits and pieces. And this is the most sort of stuff I've ever stuck to a model before. So you've got little bits of moss just here and there and everywhere. And I think he's looking really great. I think I could probably put a bit more time into him, and I probably will. But that will definitely be more than good enough for the event. I think the Halflings sort of stand out quite nicely without being sort of overpowering, and they're painted in the same scheme, like I said, as the other ones in my army. But yeah, all in all, absolutely great kit. Fascinating to put together, and quite a lot of fun to paint, and even more fun to stick loads of random foam to. And that's all for this video. Please let me know what you thought down in the comments. Maybe subscribe for more. And as ever, thanks for watching. Bye.